I just wanted to share a little bit of the process of this major painting behind me, which is, I think it's 2.3 metres by 1.7 metres, so it's quite large. I'm not filming the whole painting this time because, you know, I need to concentrate on the work, and even stopping to do this is a little bit of an interruption, but I seem to have got into the habit of sharing my process with you. And the reason I want to do that is because I'd like to encourage other artists to step into more narrative or storytelling type art. So one of the greatest motivations I find to paint in a narrative mode is inspiration from events that are going on around and how they make me feel. And as an artist, I've got a capacity to join those two things together in a unique offering to the public. Sometimes it doesn't come out very well, and sometimes I trip over my own incompetences as an artist, or the inability to be able to really say what I'm feeling in imagery even. Sometimes it just looks too cliche, other times it seems far-fetched, but then if I'm too specific, it's too much of a direct hit. So these are all the confusing sort of type things that go through my head as I'm creating a painting. This painting, I guess you could say it's a bit controversial in that it is about the current goings on in our society in particular. It's all over the world, but in Australia over all this COVID stuff. And what really has disturbed me is the division that seems to be forming within our society, and how people are just completely forgetting what we are as humanity. I find it appalling, and it's all been put into people's heads. It's a direct result of a mass psychological operation, and whether or not you agree with what's going on, that's not the point here. The point is that this is actually affecting me as a human being, as it is every single person. I think if you're not affected by this, you're just not watching it, which, okay, I understand that. I mean, ignorance is bliss. You know, it does allow you to get on with your work. So one of those kooky parts about this is that there's very few occupations available that allow you to express yourself in a way that is connecting your emotions up with the external world. And being a painter is one of those rare occupations. Whether or not it's going to go down that well, I guess I just have to take that risk, because I'm always going to offend somebody or put someone's nose out of joint if I take on something that people have, you know, have really like taken a side on. So that just has to be put aside, because I've been worried about that for the last 2 years, and I've wanted to actually tackle this change in our culture. It's a big change actually in our Western culture, but I've been not quite sure how to go about it. And you know, that probably comes back to me being frightened of losing, you know, potential clients or my fans or, you know, followers, because they may not agree with the way I portray something such as this big painting. And, you know, at the end of the day, that has just had to go out the window, because the messaging is calling me much more strongly now than anything else as I watch the misery and suffering that this whole narrative has created. And I don't mean the narrative I'm making up at the back there. There's a thing called the nudge unit. I just wrote it on the leg of this policeman's trousers to just remind me. And I do that sometimes to actually, I'll write on the canvas. I don't usually leave the writing there. Someone once told me I should, but it's to actually remind me of what I'm doing. The nudge unit is actually, it's literally a coercing unit that it's in England in particular, of people, no doubt social advisors, psychologists, etc., that are there to actually nudge everybody into doing what is being instructed to be done. And I say instructed because I'm not quite sure that it's coming from a point of well-meaning. That aside, back to the craft of painting and how I'm going about it. I've been collecting imagery for the last 2 years, just photographs I see that really stir me up, and I might just print them out on a bit of paper. It's just things that are going on in the world. I see things that I think, oh my God, I can't, you know, like art is stranger than fiction. If I can't even portray it on the canvas. I can only think of Goya and some of the other really violent revolutionary type painters. Oh, Hieronymus Bosch is right at the top of the list, to actually portray the bizarre things that have been going on, especially in Victoria with the police. Now, there's a little bit of a trick. Hang on, I'll just have a sip of my coffee. This is actually the easy stage where I'm at now, because everything is in unity, because it is still just like a relatively mono-coloured image, and it all ties together. The problems will happen, now I'm talking to you as a painter, technically when you start to actually paint all of these elements, and there's got to be a way where you work across the whole canvas as a whole to tie it all together, to keep it as like a unified but not boring painting. I was actually looking at some of Arthur Boyd's earliest works, his religious type paintings. I'll just hold one up there, see if you can see it. I think it's one about Jesus Christ. There you go, there we go. And a few other painters that have used a certain method, and it's not being realistic about the imagery, it's the opposite. It's using more kind of symbolic rendition. This was my initial drawing here, which I'll just show you. So you can see, oops, hang on, can you see that? How chaotic it all was. It was just a scratchy sketch. So the way I'm going to try and do that is to keep it all together, is to sort of work across the canvas, and I've got to really work hard at not getting stuck on like fine, really super fine detail, whereas, you know, I know Hieronymus Bosch did do that, and there is relevance to some of the activity going on in the background here, such as Christians being chased by lions and all the people in the crowd cheering it all on, which is how it sort of feels right now. People being led away in chains. There's billboards everywhere by big corporate sponsors, hello, and other things, a particular premiere in a very interesting stance, people, certain types of people in the wings, as if this is a big macabre theatre, and they're observing and enjoying themselves. So there's a lot of brutality down in the foreground here. There's a cauldron of boiling nurses. Lots of men with black helmets, which I'm trying not to say here that all police are bad. And I know, you know, that sounds like being apologetic, but that's actually a total fact. But something went wrong in Victoria, and it should really be investigated as to what went wrong. And these things happen in our societies, and suddenly we have these echoes of former horror tales in the history of humankind. You could say that, depending on what you think about the history of Germany, you could say that something went wrong with the Nazi era, and people always say, how come everybody stood by and let it happen? Well, hello, it's happening again. The way I work with this, and what I want to do with my painting, and this, you know, my paintings, but this one in particular, is to try and not be deadly specific to the time we're in now, but to hook it back into other eras without being too kitschy. So dropping in hints. I mean, one of the things that really motivated to get me going on this was something that came to my mind. It was something someone said, "You'll never take us alive, copper." And it was from, it was a quote, but someone used it, and it was from, you know, more like the Ned Kelly days, the Tasmania and the convicts and that. I loved it. It was just so, I don't know, so Australian in many ways. And it actually got me up off my couch of procrastination and really got me off the couch to get started on this. There's something about that Australian spirit that really does provoke me into action. So that's a little bit. If you're interested, you may not, you might find that all just complete nonsense. And what I've got here is just all the bits of paper around me, references, things that I've done in the past, paintings I've done in the past that I want to utilise elements of moods and things like that. There's one here that I really loved, which was called Persephone. So I've got all these different references from my past paintings that are just where I painted something that had the feeling or some sort of technique. Just, it's to remind me, and I do that. I will remind myself of the method I'm going to be using in the actual painting process, because otherwise you can tend to just sort of automatically just fall to some sort of benign default. So on a large painting, it's about keeping that consistent concentration on the way you're going to be presenting it. So, you know, as in the style, what it's going to look like. So who knows where this is going to end up. I'm sharing this, so I'm going to be held accountable to finishing it now. There's no way I'm not going to finish it. But I thought by sharing this process, you could actually get a bit more of an insight into what goes on behind the scenes in the procrastination stages and the early stages of a very large painting. Oh, by the way, there are tons of things that will grow into this painting as I'm painting it that aren't there already. This is a lot of information. I don't usually put that much drawing into a painting, but this time I knew that because it's such a large canvas and there's so much information to go in it, I had to map out certain things for you know, perspective and composition so that it actually worked from the bigger picture, you know, so when you stand back you can see where all the energy's flowing in, you know, down and in, and the perspective. I'm not super paranoid about that. Like, there's some characters that look more realistic than others, and I haven't, you know, increased the size greatly at the front, but I have pushed back the perspective at the back. I do want it to look a bit crazy, a little bit mad, a little bit lunatic, of, you know, different proportions. So wish me luck. I'm getting started on it today with the oils. See you soon.